Corey Way. I'm the Dean of Students here at SIPA, and it is really my pleasure to welcome you, and especially Andres, for kindly sharing some of his time and experience and expertise with us today. I'm just going to give a very brief introduction as to what this series is all about, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dean Desmond Byrne, who will give the introduction of Andres, and then we'll get started in the program. But about a year and a half ago, we wanted to celebrate the amazing contributions of you, students here at SIPA. You get so many folks coming through this building that are heads of state and dignitaries and heads of organizations, so you are spoiled for choice with the sorts of seminars that you go to. But we wanted to celebrate the incredible diversity and experiences and accomplishments that you all as students bring to the school. So we started what we call SIPA Speaks, which is a student speaker series, which highlights the incredible, please come in, which highlights the incredible background that you all bring from various walks of life and from various degree programs. We have had a former member of the Bloomberg administration. We have had a social entrepreneur from sub-Saharan Africa. We have had an entrepreneur from Afghanistan, and now we have an incredible presentation about community development in the Andes. And so we're really excited to celebrate this diversity as well as our incredible students. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dean Desmond Byrne, who works in the Office of Student Affairs as well, and he's going to introduce our guest speaker. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Corey. My name is Desmond Byrne. I'm an assistant dean in the SIPA Office of Student Affairs, and I thank you all for coming to our fourth iteration of our SIPA Speaks event. Our speaker today is Ochoa Toasa. He's a second-year MIA student concentrating in economic and political development. A human rights lawyer by training, Andres was social director of TECHO, Ecuador, the country chapter of one of the largest Latin American NGOs working in community development, youth mobilization, and public advocacy. His work with TECHO reached over 40 communities in the most impoverished areas of the country, mobilizing 6,000 volunteers, working with over 600 families. Today, he will discuss his experience working with various communities in Ecuador on the coast, in the capital, and within indigenous areas, highlighting the challenges of youth development and engagement in its role contributing to sustainable change. Please welcome Andres Ochoa Toasa.
Well, hi, welcome everyone. I'm very happy to see you all here, to see some friends, to see new faces, to see some colleagues also here. I wanted to take this opportunity to bring a little bit about me, about my background, about why I am here at SIPA and what made me choose a path of public service. So maybe we should start like, who am I? How did we get from here when I was like 4 years old, 5 years old, till running for candidate for the Senate last year for SIPASA? And as you all know, we all come from different paths in life, but there are certain moments that define and that made us have a purpose. So I want to share with you one of those moments, and it was my professional experience as director of the NGO TECHO in Ecuador, and how I became to know not only the community that I was part of, but also the opportunity that brings youth engagement and the opportunity that our own leadership has. So this is my family. As you can see, we're all over from Ecuador, a middle-class family. My dad is a doctor, dean of medicine. My mom is also a doctor, she's also a professor. My sister is also a doctor, so she's a professor. I am the only one who's not a doctor. But I did study law, so I was a human rights lawyer. I was working as a human rights lawyer. But then I felt that I needed to do something else. And this became a little bit of trying to find my role in the world, trying to find where I was fitting better. As you know, in Latin America, we have very big extended families. So these are two of my families. My mom's side, which is bigger, and this is my dad's side. So we all have this sense of having a connection with someone else, having a connection with the surrounding that we have, having a connection with the society that we take part of. But sometimes those connections are only placed on the people who are closest to us. So for me, it was very interesting, this experience that this allowed me to see beyond my own family background. And also, these pictures are special because last week I lost my grandma, so it's also, this talk in a way is a way of honoring her because she always wanted to push me to go into public service. This is also me now here at SIPA. And why this is important, and I think it's important because it points out to why we need to have more students speaking out to their communities, telling their stories. We're not only great professionals, we're not only great academics or great DRAs or TAs, but we're also members of a bigger community. I was part of the UNSWG last year. I'm also still a peer advisor, just finishing. Here I have my very thankful boss and all the great, wonderful team from the Kwan One class. I also participate in poetry here in the open mic. Recently I was in Kosovo, part of the workshop, and I always organize things on my place. So this is just to mention that everybody here can share something. So this is a story that I want to share. It can be your story. So it's also an invitation for you to think how to become more part of this community, but bringing more a little bit about yourself. So also let me explain to you a little bit about TECHO. What is TECHO? TECHO is an organization that started in Chile in 1998. And it started as a small group of students who one day went together to poor, impoverished neighborhood in Santiago de Chile. And then they found out that the local church was destroyed. So they brought themselves together, this group of small students, this small group of students, and they started building up a church over the weekend with basic materials. And then they realized that if they could do that over the weekend, build a church, they can also do something about the solution of lack of basic living standards in the communities around Santiago. So they started developing the idea of building emergency housing. Emergency housing, why? Because in Latin America we have many people who live in rocks, who live in plastics, who don't have even a basic wood panel to support themselves. So the conditions for these people could be very improved through something as simple as having as a wooden house. We will see that in a moment. But then this idea became more developed, and right now it's an organization that works across 19 countries in the region, that mobilizes over 200,000 people per year, and that is the biggest well-known organization for youth engagement in the region. And I think that is because of a combination of two important things which are going to be the topic of our talk, which is one, youth engagement, or the idea of putting youth as the center of development, or youth as the center of democracy building, and also bringing together communities. Bringing together communities in the fact that we live in very polarized societies. Latin America is one of the most unequal regions in the world, if not the most. And some of our countries have some of the richest neighborhoods that you can see that can compare to neighborhoods here to the developed country and that are right next to some of the most impoverished areas that you can ever see. So this is so striking because sometimes we don't know each other. So it's just a fact of putting people together to realize that they have more in common than they believe so. So this is a little bit of what TECHO does. She is actually the former director. She was the person who took over after I left. But she puts out the idea of youth engagement, advocacy. She's calling out for an action. These are the houses that are being built. This is a process of building the emergency housing. It takes about 2 days. So you can build a new unit in 2 days, and you can bring the impoverished conditions that you will see some of them to a much better standard. These are not permanent solutions. They are thought to be temporary solutions, but it's an improvement. And also what many of you, your EPD know, so that's also training on the ground, the tools to do proper diagnosis, stakeholder engagement, that's also part of it. It's not only teaching the volunteers, but also teaching people in the communities these tools so they can better organize the work they do, they can better empower the members of the community, and they can have a more effective leadership as community leaders. And now I'm going to bring like some of the strongest images of why made me stay 4 years in the organization and took the role from being a volunteer to then rising to be the director. And it was to me the promise of the future. Because across the country, wherever I went, I found the promise of the future to be all the children who live in a country that is still very polarized, that have so much hope, but are still living in very impoverished conditions. No matter whether they were in the mountains or they were in the coast, all these kids constantly show us the will to bring someone from outside and make them part of the community and create bonds. As you can see, the kids is not only a representation of the hope, but the conditions where they live. This is one of the neighborhoods that I was telling you about that is right next to Quito, Quito being the capital of Ecuador, and you can see the striking difference. This is a dumpster, and this area right here is some of the most expensive houses in the country. And that's separated maybe 5-minute walk. So this was my first experience. I was 24 years old. I had been working as a human rights lawyer for a year, just out of college or law school. I didn't find myself yet on the work that I was doing. I never had done labor work. I mean, I never had done manual work before. I never had been on the field for more than 2 days, sleeping on the ground. And why do I say that? Because TECHO characterizes by bringing the volunteers to the community. So that means that we want to stay in hotels, that means that we want to stay in houses, we stay in the schools of the communities, we stay in the community places. So we will bring only like a mat, and then we will sleep there for 2-3 days while we work. So in that sense, it was a totally new experience. The first night I couldn't sleep. Because there were people snoring around me, and because the pain was so much. But I also met this. So this was, to me, getting to know the country that I didn't know about. I come from a background of studying human rights, and I never knew that these conditions were still happening in my own country. These are conditions that look like they were from the 17th, 18th century. These were houses that don't have running water, don't have electricity. There are 1/3 of this room, and that 5 people share them together. And as I said, it was a labor work. So it was a lot of hands-on work. It was a lot of realizing that you can do something that is tangible. And I think that that's one of the powerful things about working on the field, and one of the powerful things that you can find as an experience getting outside academia, like we all know when we go into the workshops or the capstones. Because we realize that we have a possibility to change the world by doing something directly. And this was the first house that we were building. I never had done nailing before in my life, so it was really hard. I remember like the first time, it took me about 20 tries to just get the first nail. And our leader, she did it like in 2 tries. So in that sense, it was very, very empowering to realize that from here to here, it can only take a group of volunteers, of empowered youth, to do a difference. This is really very different from the houses that people are living in. This is one of the houses. As you can see, the kitchen is inside the place that they sleep in. There is no bathroom as well. And the walls are darkened because it's 4,000 high meters, about 10,000 feet high. So it's very cold. And the only way to keep people warm is to have the wood constantly being burnt, but that also creates conditions that make it very habitable. Another key feature of TECHO is that we work together with the families. It's not that we will go, build, and just leave. It's the families have a compromise to live with, to build with ourselves, to cook and eat with us, and also to share at night some activities like storytelling, like games. So in this sense, it's also thought to bring people together. You get to know people from other backgrounds that you never heard of, people that maybe even don't speak your same language, or that have problems speaking and understanding your background. You also understand that maybe the way you talk or the ideas that you talk about are not necessarily ideas that people are interested in. When you come from the city, when you come from high level education, big universities, sometimes you think that those are the topics that are interesting to the people, but then you realize that sometimes there are other things that are necessary, and there are other projects that need to be thought about. And that was me at the end of the 2 days, you know, like very, very tired, but very happy, very tired as well. But I still remember this family, I still have contact with them, because it was the first time that I realized that there are many people who have a lot of intellectual power, who have a lot of strength and will, but they don't have the opportunities we have. For example, here, Jose, he was part of the leaders of the community, and he solved problems about building the house that 3 young professionals couldn't solve. And he did it only with his ingenuity. In that sense, we realize, and I realize, that it's a matter of bringing opportunity to the people that are in a different background. One of the most powerful moments that you can have, and it's very important in that sense to be when you are in the field, is to bring the people to realize that promises matter, in the sense that promises should be fulfilled. One of the characteristics that I think really helps TECHO is that we say that we'll do something and we do it. Even if that takes a lot of effort, the organization tries to fulfill each one of the promises that is asked to the community. And that's something that breaks out sometimes the vicious cycle of not only development, but also the vicious cycle of politics. Because these communities have lost so many hopes that the first time that somebody comes and tell them, let's work together, is people don't believe in it. And by doing this, by working together and by making something tangible, we're able to create the links that later on will lead to have a stronger relationship. This is another striking figure that we had back in my country. This was in a different community, also an indigenous communities in Andes. But it was the first time that I noticed the powerful structures that still exist about gender. What is important about this picture is that we have Maria, she was going to be the person who was going to get the house, and we have 2 houses here. These 2 houses belong to the sons of the family, but they are closed, so she cannot live there. Where she lives is in this small space. This small space is comparable to the space that we have for guinea pigs. You know, guinea pigs is a delicacy in my country. So it was just striking to see that because of some structural conditions, older females could not have living conditions. And that as a young professional coming from a developing country, believing that we're getting there, tells you that there are many barriers that need to be broken down. And those start being broken down sometimes with small things, sometimes like everybody eating together. One of the most powerful things that I believe people start to do, and I also started to do, was sitting male and female together, because in some backgrounds it's not allowed or it's not expected, like the female will be serving you, and by the simple issue of having everybody sitting together, you can send a powerful message. And that powerful message can start to replicate, not only to the people who you're working with, but to the volunteers to be knowledgeable about these differences. Finally, we worked and we finalized the house, but then there come another striking feature in my experience versus volunteer, was finding these communities in the big cities. This is right next to Guayaquil. Guayaquil is one of the biggest ports in Latin and South America. It's also one of the ports that have the highest trading in the area, so a lot of wealth goes through the port. Nonetheless, you have these conditions that are about 20 minutes from the center. Not only, these are different from the mountainous regions because not only you have poverty, you have a lot of violence. And you don't only have a lot of violence, you have also a lot of drug and gang activity. So it is in these communities that you realize that hope sometimes is lost, but what is important is you can bring hope. If you have a group of young people coming to a neighborhood and working together without asking for anything, that can create change. We saw something very interesting in that many of the young kids who were involved in the gangs later on wanted to be volunteers themselves. And they would come when we will do the construction work and they will participate. In a sense, that allows us to start creating like a very important cycle. Because if you think of this happening in one community, the fact that we were working in 24 communities, we were mobilizing 6,000 volunteers, and we were managing about 1,200 different projects. If this small activity can be replicated in all instances, you can create like a model of change. And that then is when I will talk about when I jumped into being management. Because one of the things about youth engagement is that we're very dynamic. People can do a lot of things, we're very adaptable. As you know here, we're all young, so when we need to do something, we do it. But the problem is that sometimes we have a lot of problems with the structure, and that was one of the problems that the organization had. So in that sense, I wanted to be part of management because I wanted to make change and I wanted to make the organization better. I wanted to make the organization more efficient. Because if you have an organization that has such potential, that has such reach, and sometimes you have overlapping projects, you have duplicating efforts, you are losing opportunity. So in that sense, I became part of the team. I started managing the 6,000 volunteers. I started managing a budget of about 1 million a year. And that allowed me to also realize on other aspects of development. That you can bring a lot of people together, but people also need tools. So it's not only about the will that you want to have, it's also about bringing the people in the community, bringing your volunteers to have more empowerment in terms of being able to do effective change. It's not only about communicating a strong message, it's also about being a message that is effective. It's also about bringing the images that we have to the community that is not part of that image. So sometimes a lot of people that we talk with in our families wouldn't know that this existed. So the work was volunteer by volunteer, bringing these images to people to then realize that the priorities that we have as a country may not be the right ones. Because we're still talking about beautifying a park in the city when there are still neighborhoods who don't have running water. We're still talking about making stations for or building football stadiums for football when we don't have schools. So by doing this exercise of advocacy through volunteerism by the volunteers, you can bring a more humane image to the development work. But at the same time, as an organization, by being able to project the reality, you're also advocating for change. So we became a little bit stubborn in telling people, this is what's happening, that's wrong. That's why I also tend to do those things still here at SIPA. And why is that important? Because sometimes you will realize that, that you are by yourself. Sometimes working in development and working with youth engagement is difficult. This is one of the communities we have more trouble with. We had to pull out of the community at the end. It was a community in the Andes that unfortunately was 5 hours away from where we were working. This is a community that has 97% of extreme poverty. That means that 97 out of 100 people live with less than $2 per day. The family, not the person. So it's a community that is desertified, so there's no longer production of any agricultural output. It has no presence of the government in terms of infrastructure, but also, and sadly, is one of the places that has the highest amount of international development funds pulling in. And that was hard to be there because you realize of sometimes the good efforts cannot be the best efforts when there is no coordination. And being part of that community means also that realizing that it's not about a competition about funds. Sometimes we tend to forget that in the development world, but it's a competition of working together, of synergies, of creating alliances, of creating coalitions. And by doing so, maybe we can change some situations. But here we worked for 2 years, and unfortunately we had to be out of it. This is another community that was very similar, but nonetheless there we didn't pull out. What was the difference? It was the difference not the volunteers, it was not the difference the families, because we had volunteers and families, it was the coalitions that we built. Here we were able to build, to work together with not only the local community, but also with local schools, also with the municipal government. Even though we were telling them they were not doing enough, they were willing to work with us. So in that sense, that allowed to have a sustainable project for many years. And I think that the role of having young kids coming to the offices of majors, of ministers, and asking for change allowed to the community leaders to then push for harder opportunities. How the advocacy model worked for us was very interesting, because what we would do is like we would push publicly hard. We would do some installations, like for example, build up one of these houses in the middle of the main square in the city, calling out the attention of people, saying this is wrong. And then when they will invite us to come and talk to us, we will bring the community leaders and be the community leaders who make the talk. This also came with the issue of preparing the community leaders to have advocacy tools, to have some time management, some communication tools that would make them be effective. So at the end, what we wanted was not for us to be the protagonists, but to call the attention to then the community leaders and the communities themselves be the protagonists. And then I come back to this picture because I think that's something very important from my experience, not only as manager but as a volunteer, is the issue of leadership. Each one of us in the organization had at some point somebody who inspired us change. Each one of us in the organizations had somebody that at some point welcomed us to the opportunity to empower ourselves and lead a team. I remember that one of the coolest things that I ever did in my 20s was the first time that I led a construction team. Because 2 months ago I had never done this, and 2 months later I was leading a construction team. So that was very empowering. If you believe this, for a 24-year-old, 25-year-old, it's one of the things that led yourself to believe that you can do something, to later run for director of an NGO, and later come to Colombia, and later think that you want to go into an international organization, later maybe be Secretary General, who knows. It all starts with one small step. Someone empowering you, someone believing in you. And that's something that a principle that I think that we all need to bring, and that we tried always to put in the kids that work in our workshops. Some of the workshops that we did were workshops about artistry with kids who were either on the streets or kids who didn't have any type of community space in the communities. We also did workshops about finances, house finances for the families. We did workshops for leadership for leaders. We were workshops for conflict resolution, because when you work in communities, you realize that one of the biggest things is the conflict that happens there. So in that sense, there we were trying always to bring the little that we know to the people. And then we realized that it was very interesting, because the people themselves would start duplicating the things. It would be something as simple as building as small as cutting down wood to be allow the kids to draw things, or it would be something as simple as getting everybody together to ask them what they want to do for the community. Doesn't require much. It doesn't require a space that needs to be built first. It doesn't require $100 million. Doesn't require $1 million space investment. It requires just the willingness to sit down and listen. And I think that that's another important quality and principle that we learn in this experience. Not only leadership, but it has to be horizontal leadership. That means listening to the people you are working with. And not only listening to the community, listen to your fellow volunteers. And if you are a manager, if you are somebody who is leading someone, you should be able to treat everyone as your equal and understand their potential, and sometimes that they can do things better than you. So this leads me to just remember the two first of my leaders. They were 1 year older than me, but both of them were strong women. And to me, that's very important, coming from a region that has a lot of patriarchal and a lot of patriarchal structures and a lot of machismo. To have young women leading teams and be the public figures is very empowering. And you going through this process and realizing that you can have very strong leaders that can be women, that are women, make you replicate this example and always say to promote this ideal. Why? Because these things matter. Sometimes we work in communities that they have never seen a woman leading a team. Not because women can't, it's because they haven't been allowed to do so. So by allowing the person who is building the house, who is telling each other what to do, be a girl, sometimes younger than the people you're working with, has a strong message. So those small things matter in the type of leadership that we want. So this is a picture of me later on. I learned how to do all these things. But this leads us to another type of principle that we wanted to talk about, that I wanted to talk about. It's